The mahogany conference table in my grandfather's lawyer's office gleamed like polished amber as Mr. Peterson opened the heavy leather folder containing the will. My mother sat across from me, her perfectly manicured hand resting protectively on my brother James's shoulder. The golden boy of the family, fresh from his third failed business venture and second divorce. As per Mr. Richard Montgomery's final wishes, Mr. Peterson began adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. The distribution of his estate will be as follows. I already knew what was coming. Grandpa Rich had been different from the rest of the family. He'd seen through James's charm and recognized my potential. The substantial inheritance he'd promised me would finally allow me to expand my investment company beyond the careful, modest growth I'd managed so far. To my beloved granddaughter Sarah, Mr. Peterson read, "I leave." Actually, my mother interrupted, sliding a document across the table, "there's been a change." My stomach dropped as Mr. Peterson picked up the paper, his eyebrows rising slightly. A codicil? Dated 3 weeks before Mr. Montgomery's death. When he was heavily medicated, I said quietly, meeting my mother's steel-gray eyes. She waved her hand dismissively. Your grandfather understood that family needs come first. James has had some setbacks and he needs the capital to restart his business ventures. Setbacks? I couldn't help but laugh. Is that what we're calling losing $2 million in a cryptocurrency scam? James had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but Mother's face hardened. Your brother has vision. He takes risks. Unlike some people who waste their time with. She glanced at my simple business suit with disdain. Whatever small-time investments you're playing with. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. According to this codicil, the bulk of the estate, including all investment accounts and the family's real estate holdings, will pass to James Montgomery. Sarah Montgomery will receive. He paused, checking the figure twice, $10,000. The room spun slightly. $10,000. From an estate worth millions. My carefully laid plans for expansion crumbled like sand castles in the tide. It's for the best, dear. My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. Your brother needs the money more. You're doing fine with your little company. My little company. They only knew. While James had been burning through investors' money with his grand schemes, I'd been quietly building Montgomery Investment Partners. The small-time investments, my mother dismissed, had grown into a substantial portfolio, carefully hidden under my maternal grandmother's maiden name. Is there anything else? I asked Mr. Peterson, keeping my voice steady. He shuffled through the papers. Just one matter. The sale of Mr. Montgomery's primary residence. The estate needs to be liquidated within 6 months. My mother's composure cracked slightly. The house. But James and I were planning to move there. It's been my dream home for 30 years. The Victorian mansion had been my grandfather's pride and joy, and my mother's obsession. She'd spent years hinting about how perfect it would be for her and James to live there, running the family's social life from its grand parlors. Unfortunately, Mr. Peterson explained, the codicil specifically requires all properties to be sold at market value. No private family sales. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. If that's all, I have a meeting to attend. Sarah, James called as I reached the door. No hard feelings, right? It's just business. Business. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. You're right, James. It's just business. In my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Marcus? It's Sarah. Remember that property portfolio we've been building? I need you to liquidate everything. Yes, all of it. We're going shopping for real estate. My next call was to my real estate agent. Linda? That Victorian mansion on Highland Park that's coming on the market? I want it. Whatever it costs. The Montgomery estate? Linda sounded surprised. That's going to be expensive even with your resources. Price isn't an issue, I replied, watching through my car window as James helped our mother into his leased luxury car. Just make sure the sale is handled through one of our shell companies. The family doesn't need to know who's buying. I ended the call and started my car, thinking about the look on my mother's face when she dismissed my little company. She had no idea that while James was frittering away investors' money, I'd built a real estate empire that could buy and sell their precious inheritance 10 times over. My phone buzzed with a text from Mother. Family dinner on Sunday? We need to discuss the house situation. I typed back a brief, can't make it. Business meeting. Let them plan their move into Grandpa's house. They were about to learn that some small-time investors pack quite a punch. And sometimes the best revenge isn't just succeeding. It's succeeding so quietly that no one sees you coming until it's too late. 2 months after the will reading, I sat in my real estate agent's office, signing the final papers for the Victorian mansion. Through a series of carefully structured shell companies, I'd not only outbid every other potential buyer but had also managed to expedite the closing process. Congratulations, Ms. Reynolds. Linda used my grandmother's maiden name as she handed me the keys. The house is yours. Just then my phone lit up with a call from James. I let it go to voicemail, already knowing what it was about. The family had received notice yesterday that their final bid on the house had been rejected. The voicemail notification pinged. Sis, you won't believe this. Some investment company outbid us for Grandpa's house. Mom's devastated. Can you loan us some money to make a counteroffer? I know things have been tense, but family has to stick together, right? Family has to stick together. The irony was almost poetic. I drove to the mansion, parking in the circular driveway just as another car pulled up. Mother stepped out, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. Sarah. She looked confused. What are you doing here? Just checking out the property, I replied casually. Heard it sold. Some heartless corporation bought it, she spat. Probably turn it into offices or condos. Your grandfather would be horrified. He peered at me. Why are you really here? Actually, I pulled out my keys. I'm meeting the new owner. Would you like to come in? Her eyes narrowed at the sight of the keys. How do you have keys? I smiled, unlocking the grand front door. Let's just say I'm very familiar with the new owner. We stepped into the soaring foyer, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows your grandfather had imported from Italy. Mother's fingers twitched, probably already planning where she'd put her antiques. The new owner, I continued, watching her face carefully, has some interesting plans for the property. Plans? Her voice sharpened. What plans? And how do you know the owner? Just then my phone buzzed with an email from my property management company. I opened it, turning the screen toward her. Because Mother, I am the owner. Or rather, Reynolds Investment Group is my company. The color drained from her face as she read the email detailing the renovation schedule for the mansion. Your company? But you just have that little investment firm. That little firm? I walked to the grand staircase, running my hand along the polished banister. It's worth more than Grandpa's entire estate. Has been for years. While you and James were counting inheritance money that wasn't yours yet, I was building something real. She sank onto a velvet settee, her perfectly maintained composure cracking. But the codicil. James needs to learn that success isn't inherited, I cut her off. And you need to learn that the daughter you dismissed as small-time now owns your dream home. My phone buzzed again, James calling for the 3rd time today. I answered, putting it on speaker. Sis. Thank God you picked up. Listen, about the house. He paused. Wait, where are you? That echo. I'm in Grandpa's house, I replied. With Mother. We're discussing the new ownership situation. You found out who bought it? He sounded eager. Maybe we can make them an offer. Oh, I know exactly who bought it, I said, watching Mother's face. Reynolds Investment Group. My company. The silence on the other end was deafening. Your what? James finally managed. The little investment firm you both loved to mock? It's not so little anymore. In fact, I pulled up my company's portfolio on my tablet, showing Mother. We just acquired 3 more properties in Highland Park. This mansion is just the beginning. Mother's hands trembled as she looked at the numbers. This is impossible. You never had this kind of money. No, I earned it. While James was losing other people's millions, I was quietly multiplying my own. I walked to the windows overlooking the garden. And now I own the house you used that codicil to keep me from inheriting. Funny how things work out. Sarah, Mother stood, straightening her jacket. We're family. Surely we can work something out. Like you worked out taking away my inheritance? I turned back to her. The house will be undergoing extensive renovations. Once they're complete, it'll be available for rent. At market value, of course. You're welcome to apply like any other tenant. 3 months after purchasing the mansion, I sat in what used to be my grandfather's study, now my home office, reviewing rental applications. The renovations had transformed the Victorian masterpiece into something even more spectacular, blending modern luxury with classic architecture. My phone buzzed with yet another text from James. Mom's not eating, barely sleeping. That house meant everything to her. Can't we discuss terms? Before I could respond, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Mother stood in the doorway, looking smaller somehow in her carefully pressed suit. The housekeeper let me in, she said quietly. I hope that's all right. I gestured to a chair. I assume this is about your rental application? She sat stiffly, her designer purse clutched in her lap. Sarah, this house, it's been my dream for 30 years. Your grandfather knew that. Like he knew what he was signing when you brought him that codicil? I kept my voice neutral. When he was on heavy medication? Her fingers whitened around her purse strap. We did what was best for the family. James needed consequences, I interrupted, pulling out a file. Speaking of which, how's his latest venture going? The luxury pet spa. Mother's face tightened. There were unexpected complications. You mean he lost another $1 million? I slid the file across the desk. My investment firm tracks these things. Interesting how he managed to lose the inheritance money even faster than his previous failures. He's trying, she defended weakly. No, Mother. He's failing, because you never let him learn from his mistakes. I stood, walking to the window that overlooked the garden where I'd once played as a child. Every time he crashed a business, you cushioned his fall. Every time he needed money, you made sure he got it, even if it meant taking it from someone else. We never took. You took my inheritance, I turned back to her. The inheritance Grandpa promised me because he saw something in me that you never did. He saw that I could build something real. And now you're punishing us, she whispered. No. I returned to my desk, pulling up the rental agreement on my laptop. I'm running a business. The house is available for rent at market value. Your application will be considered like anyone else's, based on income, credit history, and rental references. Her face paled. But with James's recent difficulties, his bankruptcies, I provided. His destroyed credit, the multiple evictions from his previous apartments? Yes, those might be problems. We can pay, she straightened her spine. I still have my personal accounts. I pulled up another file. The ones you've been draining to cover James's losses? Those accounts. Tears appeared in her perfectly made-up eyes. Sarah, please. We're family. Family. I laughed softly. Like when you told the country club I was finding myself, while James was building an empire? Or when you skipped my company's first major acquisition celebration because James needed moral support after his divorce. My phone buzzed again. James had sent a photo of himself standing outside the mansion's gates. Remember all the good times here? Family means forgiveness, right? I showed Mother the message. He still doesn't get it, does he? Neither of you do. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about consequences. What do you want? She asked finally. Name your price. I pulled out one last document, a contract I'd had drawn up weeks ago. James steps down from any involvement in family business decisions. He gets a real job, not another startup. And you? I met her eyes. You publicly acknowledge what you did with that codicil. You want me to admit? That you manipulated a dying man to change his will? Yes. I pushed the contract forward. Sign this, follow these terms, and you can rent the house. At market rate, paid monthly, no special treatment. She stared at the contract, her hands trembling. And if we refuse? Then I have several other qualified applicants interested in leasing a newly renovated Victorian mansion. I smiled. I hear the Thompson family is very interested. Their daughter could use your old room. Mother picked up the contract, reading through tears. You've become quite ruthless. No, Mother. I've become successful. There's a difference. I handed her a pen. Sometimes the best lessons about family come from learning what real success looks like. She signed, her usually perfect signature shaky. Welcome to your dream home, I said, taking the contract. As my tenant. The lease terms begin next month. Don't be late with the rent. I'm not as forgiving as Grandpa was. As she left, I looked at the family photo on my desk. taken years ago before James's failures, before the codicil, before they learned that the daughter they dismissed had become the owner of their dreams. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just succeeding, it's succeeding so well that those who doubted you have to pay rent to live in the shadow of your success. And as for James, he started his new job in the mailroom of a real estate firm next week. Entry-level, minimum wage, no family safety net. Sometimes the hardest lessons about family are learned one rent check at a time. After all, every dream home comes with a price, and sometimes that price is paid in both money and pride. The Victorian mansion stood proud against the setting sun, its windows gleaming like justice served on a silver platter. Inside, my mother was probably already planning where to put her furniture, not realizing that every piece would need approval from the property manager. My property manager. Because sometimes, the best dreams aren't the ones you inherit. They're the ones you build yourself, brick by brick, investment by investment, until you own not just a house, but the very foundation of someone else's dreams. And that's a lesson worth every penny of rent. As I closed my office for the day, one final email arrived from my grandfather's old lawyer, Mr. Peterson. Attached was a letter my grandfather had written before the codicil, meant to be delivered after everything settled. My dearest Sarah, I always knew you were different, not because you needed money but because you knew how to make it grow. They'll try to change my will, but remember, the best revenge isn't inheriting wealth, it's building it. I left you the smallest share because I knew you'd turn it into the biggest empire. Never let them see you coming. Proud of you, kiddo. Love, Grandpa Rich. I smiled, touching the elegant stationery. He'd known, of course he'd known. The codicil hadn't been a setback. It had been his final test. And I'd passed it spectacularly. Tonight, Mother and James would sleep under my roof in my house, their dreams now dependent on my success. And tomorrow, they'd wake up to the reality that the daughter they'd dismissed had become the architect of their future. Sometimes, the smallest inheritance can build the biggest legacy, especially when it's built on brains instead of birthright.